Chapter 5. Sunday evening. Doreen parked at Rosemore and headed toward Nan's little corner suite, taking the stepping stones as fast as she could. She landed on the back patio and tried the glass door, but it was locked. "Drat," she said. She rapped hard, but no answer came from within. She quickly made her way around the flagstones to the main front door of the retirement home, just in time to see Mac pulling up. He glared at her. She raised both hands, palms up. "What?" she asked. "I have to protect Nan. You're not allowed to upset her." The look of astonishment on his face had her groaning. "Not that you would knowingly try to upset her." He just shook his head and said, "Come on. Let's see what's going on." "I already know what's going on," she said glumly. "Nan probably put bets on Alan Hornby." "I did not." Nan's strident voice carried across the foyer, where at least a half-dozen other residents of the home had gathered. "Richie said to Nan she should resolve this. She's your granddaughter." "Somebody called the police," Nan said, rolling her eyes. "Like we need their help." The other residents muttered their assent. Mac just sighed. "Somebody called the police because there was a ruckus," he said. "You can't blame me for showing up and doing my job." Nan looked mollified. "At least you brought Doreen with you." "No," Doreen cried out, rushing toward Nan. "I came ahead of him." Nan looked from her to Mac. "What do you mean, ahead of him?" "We were having dinner," Doreen said, "when dispatch called in. As soon as I heard what was going on, I raced out in front of him." Nan's expression turned crafty. She faced Richie. "See? I told you." Richie surprised Doreen as he clapped his hands in joy. "We'll make double the money on this one, Nan," he cried out in almost a hooting manner. Doreen looked at Nan and then at Richie, and again to Mac. "Did I miss something?" "I doubt it. Come on, Nan. Let's have a little talk." Just then, another vehicle pulled up. Mac said, "Looks like Darren is here too." "Oh no," Richie said. "Time for me to leave then." And he turned and tried to hustle away, but Mac grabbed him by the trailing end of his bathrobe and said, "Nope, that won't happen, Richie. If you call the police in, you'll deal with the consequences." "We didn't call the police," Nan said. "Why would you even think that?" "I'm sure you didn't," Mac said, obviously striving for patience. "But if you caused such a ruckus that the police are called, then you have to deal with the consequences." "Why didn't you say that in the first place?" Nan asked. She looked over at Richie and grinned. "Maybe they'll cuff us and take us to a jail cell." She held out her wrists. "I've never been arrested before." Doreen stepped forward and said, "Yes, you have, Nan." Nan turned to her granddaughter and said, "Shush, you didn't have to tell him that. It was such fun last time. I just wanted to repeat it." Richie looked at Mac and put his hands out to be handcuffed too. "If she gets to be arrested, I do too. No way I'll die without having experienced what jail is like." Darren walked through the door, a cop Doreen recognized but didn't actually know. He took one look at Richie and said, "Granddad, what are you up to?" Doreen snickered. The new arrival looked at her and groaned. "Of course you'd be at the bottom of this one." Outraged, she said, "I came to protect my poor Nan." He snorted at that too. "The last thing your poor Nan needs is protection," he snapped. "She's led my poor granddad down a criminal path." Doreen's jaw dropped as she watched Nan cuddle up with Richie. "Oh good Lord," she said, "I really don't want to know what those two are up to." "Oh yes you do," Mac said. He grabbed her by the shoulder and gently nudged her forward. "Remember, you wanted to get here to protect your Nan." She glared up at him. "I might just go home and finish my dinner," she said. "And since you didn't finish yours, I'll eat yours too." Nan laughed. "You two sound like an old married couple already," she said, pure delight on her face. Richie nodded. "They do indeed," he said. They do indeed. Even Darren chuckled. Now you're done for because once these two get to matchmaking, you know what happens. They can just stop whatever matchmaking they've got in their minds, Doreen said, raising herself up to her full height. She glared down at her Nan. Nan, you will not go there. Do you hear me? Nan tried to look appropriately subdued, and then lost it and cracked up. She patted Mac on the hand and said, Dear, you go home and finish your dinner. We'll be just fine here. I can't do that, Mac said with a heavy sigh. As much as I wish I could. Who called the police? Doreen heard a faint voice. She turned to see Maisie, standing off to the side with a little finger wave. I did. And why did you do that? Mac asked Maisie. Maisie took a step back. Doreen stepped in between the two of them. Lower your voice, she ordered Mac. Maisie is shy and easily scared. He looked at Maisie in surprise, but gentled his voice. So Maisie, what were these two doing that bothered you? She sniffled and patted her cheeks, as if not sure what to say now that all attention was on her. Of course it would be her, Nan muttered from behind Doreen. Doreen spun and glared at her. Nan stuck out her tongue in response. It was all Doreen could do to not laugh. She turned again and said, Maisie, do you want me to walk you back to your room? I'm sure all of this is pretty upsetting. Maisie looked pathetically grateful. Where's your room? Doreen asked. I'm down at the far end, she said. Good. Let me walk you there, Doreen said. What's upsetting you? She knew all the rest of the people gathered in the lobby watched their progress. Maisie leaned closer and whispered, Your Nan is not very nice. Doreen bit her tongue on that one. She has her moments, she said gently, but her heart is as good as gold. Maybe, she said, but I'm not so sure about that. Joe and I broke up. He wants to get back together with Nan. Doreen looked at Maisie and saw tears in her eyes. Doreen remembered how Nan had felt when Maisie had come traipsing into her room, talking about how Joe needed his sleep afterward. Doreen sighed and said, Love triangles are difficult, aren't they? Maisie's eyes welled up. Yes, they are, she whispered. They arrived at Maisie's door. She opened it up and stepped inside. Even from the doorway, Doreen had a hard time with the smells coming from the room. You do like incense, don't you? Oh no, that's air fresheners, she said. I absolutely love the smell of patchouli. Oh, how nice. The inside of Doreen's stomach twisted. If there was one fragrance she couldn't stand, patchouli was it. Anyway, I'm sure Mac needs to talk to you because you called the police. Just tell him what you know and it'll be fine. Thank you, Maisie said. I really do appreciate your kindness. It's easy to be kind, Doreen said. But please don't lie. You have a reason for saying what you need to say, and you have every right to feel safe here. As she stepped back, she saw Mac striding toward her. She motioned at the room and said, Maisie's waiting for you. He went to say something, but Doreen shook her head, again pointed at the open doorway. He nodded and stepped in. So Maisie, can you tell me what's going on here? Doreen smiled at his nice, strong official voice because even though it sounded businesslike, it was very gentle. She chuckled at that. Even Mac could be trained apparently. With that thought uppermost in her mind, she headed back to the open area where people still milled about. In fact, the numbers had doubled. She glanced around looking for Nan but saw no sign of her. C approached Richie, talking to Darren. Richie, where did Nan go? Probably gone to lie down, I expect, he said. With all this ruckus going on, we all need our sleep, you know, he said, scowling at his grandson. Darren just pushed his hat back, pinched the bridge of his nose and said, And I'd be happy to go home and finish my own dinner, but every time you get into a ruckus here, they call me. Well, they shouldn't, should they? Richie snapped. They should be calling whoever is on duty. We're a small precinct, Grandad. When it comes to family issues, we try to leave it for a family member to handle. Ha. So how come Mac always comes for Nan? Darren grinned. You know the answer to that. Doreen heard Richie's comment and Darren's answer. She wanted to pipe up and ask for clarification herself when somebody else said, I don't understand. Richie turned and in a smug tone said, because Mac is always looking out for Doreen. Ah, commented the other resident, who Doreen didn't know. Well, that makes sense. Those two are really an item, aren't they? Doreen shook her head, stepped forward and said, if you don't mind, I'll go see my Nan then. And she turned her back on the gossip and headed off. She really did hate gossip. No problem, said Darren. Pretty sure Mac will be along in a few minutes. Her back stiffened. She looked over her shoulder to glare at him, saw his big grin, and promptly turned and walked down the hallway to Nan. Doreen needed to do something to stop this gossip, and to stop it fast. Now, if only she had an idea of how to do that.